In literary criticism, assumptions refer to the underlying beliefs or ideas that a critic brings to a text, influencing their interpretation. Gender studies, feminism, and queer theory are academic fields built on foundational assumptions that critically interrogate traditional understandings of sex, gender, and sexuality. While intertwined, each field has distinct core assumptions. Gender studies is an interdisciplinary field that primarily assumes that gender is a social construct, distinct from biological sex. Key assumptions include: first, gender is not biologically determined. The roles, behaviors, and attributes associated with being male or female are culturally shaped, not innate biological traits. This means that being a man or a woman does not automatically decide how someone should think, behave, or feel. Culture teaches us what is proper for boys and girls. For example, boys don't cry or girls must be gentle. These ideas come from society, not from nature. Gender is a system of power. Gender organizes social life and creates hierarchies, often leading to inequality and oppression between genders. Gender is not just about identity, it's also about power. Society often values masculine traits over feminine ones. In literature, notice who gets to speak or who leads and who decides. Those patterns reveal gendered power structures. Intersectionality is crucial. Gender intersects with other forms of identity such as race, class, and sexuality, creating complex and overlapping systems of oppression and privilege. Gender does not stand alone. It intersects with race, class, age, and even religion. So a woman does not experience gender in the same way if she is wealthy, poor, black, Asian, young, or disabled. Challenging the public or private divide. It assumes that personal and domestic life, or private life, is political and structured by power relations, just like the public sphere. Private life, like family, relationship, housework, also reflects power. Gender studies says that what happens at home is shaped by the same social rules that operate in public life. Feminist theory, which has evolved through several waves, broadly shares the gender studies assumption that gender is socially constructed but centers on women's experience and achieving gender equality. Some assumptions include: first, patriarchy is the dominant social system. Society is structured in a way that men dominate in most spheres, leading to the systematic subordination of women. Feminism assumes that society has historically been patriarchal, meaning men have more power in politics, family, religion, and culture. This affects how women are represented and treated. Next, women's experiences are unequal to men's. Feminism recognizes that women face specific forms of oppression, including economic disparity, sexual violence, and restricted autonomy. Feminism points out that women often face disadvantages like lower pay, unsafe conditions, lack of autonomy, and limited choices. When reading a text, ask, how does the story show the struggles or silencing of women? Gender is political. Personal issues such as reproduction, family roles, and sexuality are seen as political issues shaped by power structures. Feminism says that issues like motherhood, sexuality, marriage, and domestic work are not just private matters. They are shaped by laws, norms, and social expectations. Next, advocacy for social change. A central assumption is the need for activism and critical analysis to fundamentally change society and end gender oppression. Feminism doesn't stop at analysis. It calls for action. It asks us to rethink tradition, challenge injustice, and imagine more equal systems. In short, feminism helps us see how patriarchy works in stories and in real life, and why change is needed. Queer theory emerged from feminism and LGBTQ+ movements, taking the critique of norms even further. Its central assumptions deconstruct the very categories that gender studies and earlier feminism sometimes relied upon. Like first, rejection of stable identities. Queer theory assumes that sexual and gender identities are not fixed, stable, or essential. Rather, they are fluid and dynamic. Queer theory rejects the idea that someone is naturally or permanently one thing, like strictly male, female, gay, or straight. Identities shift depending on context, culture, and personal experience. Next, gender is performative. As theorized by Judith Butler, gender is not who one is, but a series of repeated acts, gesture, and behaviors that bring gender into being. The self or identity is an illusion created by these performances. It is something we are. It is something we repeat. Next, critique of heteronormativity and cisnormativity. It assumes that society operates under the assumption that heterosexuality and cisgender identity are the default normal states, and these norms must be critiqued and dismantled. Queer theory challenges the idea that heterosexuality is the default or most normal form of identity. Many texts assume that this without question, and queer readings look for where norms limit characters or silence alternative identities. Challenging binaries. Queer theory rejects the notion that gender and sexuality exist as strict binaries like male, female, gay, straight, and actively works to disrupt these classifications. Queer theory resists strict oppositions, and it asks what happens when a character falls in between or outside these categories. The natural is also constructed. Queer theory pushes further by asking how society gives meaning to the body itself. It argues that the categories male and female are shaped by language, institutions, and cultural expectation, not just biology. So to conclude, gender studies examine how society constructs gender roles and power. Feminism focuses on women's experiences and fights inequality. Queer theory challenges fixed categories and critiques norms about sexuality and identity. These three theories helps us read text with sharper eyes. We move beyond what the story says and look at what it assumes about gender, power, and identity.
Good day, everyone. Today, I will be discussing three important concepts that help us understand how gender shapes society, gender studies, feminism, and queer theory. Let me start with gender studies. Gender studies is an interdisciplinary approach, which means it combines ideas and methods from different fields such as sociology, psychology, literature, anthropology, and history. Because gender affects many parts of our lives, our behavior, expectations, opportunities, and even our culture, we cannot study it using only one discipline. That is why gender studies borrows tools from many subjects to create deeper and more complete understanding. Next is qualitative research. In gender studies, researchers often focus on qualitative data like interviews, observations, personal stories, media content, and case studies. This type of research helps them explore experiences rather than just numbers. For example, instead of counting how many women experience discrimination, qualitative research tries to understand how they experience it, why it happens, and what it feels like. Qualitative method help reveal patterns, meanings, and social interactions related to gender. The third point is critical analysis. Gender studies encourages us to look beyond the surface and ask deeper questions. We examine how society creates and maintains gender roles, how media portrays men and women, and how power operates in relationships. Critical analysis means questioning stereotypes, identifying bias, and understanding why certain behaviors are considered normal or acceptable. Now let's move on to feminism. Feminism is more than just a movement. It is also an academic way of studying how gender inequality operates. Feminist scholars examine how women's experiences have been shaped by society and how inequalities continue today. The first approach under feminism is textual analysis. This is especially used in literature and media. Textual analysis looks at how women are represented in stories, books, films, or advertisements. For example, are female characters given agency? Are they stereotyped? Do they only exist to support male characters? Textual analysis helps us understand how culture shapes ideas about gender. Next is historical context study. To understand women's status today, feminist also looks at the past. It examines how women were treated in different time periods, what rights were denied to them, and how they struggled for equality. Knowing the historical backgrounds helps explain why certain gender expectations still exist today. The last point is gender role examination. This means analyzing how society assigns roles and expectations to men and women. Examples include women should be caring or soft spoken, men should be strong or unemotional. Feminist scholars study how these roles limit personal freedom and how we can create a society where people can express themselves freely regardless of gender. Finally, let's talk about queer theory. While feminism focuses mainly on women's issues and gender inequality, queer theory expands the conversation by studying gender identity and sexuality. It challenges the idea that there are only two genders or that heterosexuality is the default or normal. The first concept is deconstruction of norms. Queer theory questions traditional beliefs about what is considered normal for gender and sexuality. It critiques the idea that people should fit into fixed category like male, female, or gay, straight. Instead, it argues that identity is fluid and socially constructed. Next, we have identity exploration. Queer theory explores the experiences of LGBTQ individuals, how they form their identities, how society responds to those identities, and how these identities are represented in media and culture. It also highlights that identity is not just biological, it is influenced by culture, environment, and personal choice. The last point is representation analysis. Queer theory examines how LGBTQ people are portrayed in literature, film, and media. Are they shown in a stereotypical way? Are they given complex and realistic roles? Representation analysis helps us understand how media affects societal attitudes towards queer individuals. To conclude, gender studies, feminism, and queer theory all help us understand how gender and identity work in society. Gender studies provides a broad, interdisciplinary, and critical view. Feminism focuses on women's experiences, gender roles, and historical inequality. Queer theory challenges traditional norms and explores diverse identities and representations. Together, these fields allow us to think more critically, become more aware of inequality, and appreciate the diversity of human experiences. Understanding these concepts is important not only for academics but also for building a more inclusive and respectful society.